My name is Alice. You know how life throws you curveballs when you least expect it? Well, mine came hurling at me at 39, right in the middle of what I thought was my settled, predictable life. After my first marriage tanked, I swore off the whole idea. No more ties, I'd tell myself, burying my days in the scent of roses and lilies at my little flower shop. That was, until David walked in. It was a regular Tuesday, or so I thought, me behind the counter, sorting through a new shipment of carnations, when he came in. First thing I noticed? He looked as out of place in a flower shop as a cat in a swimming pool. Tall, with hands that clearly were more used to hard hats than delicate petals, he stood by the entrance, scanning the place like he was planning a construction project rather than picking out flowers. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying not to sound as amused as I felt. "Yeah," he started, scratching the back of his head. "I need a bouquet. For my mom. It's her birthday." His straightforwardness was refreshing, if not a bit blunt. I guided him through some choices, explaining what each flower symbolized, but he waved it off. "Look, I don't need the fancy stuff. Just something that says, 'Happy birthday, Mom,' without making my wallet cry." I chuckled, picking out a few blooms that wouldn't break the bank. "Here, how about this?" He eyed the bouquet, then nodded. "That'll do. How much?" As I rang him up, he glanced around the shop, his gaze landing on a picture of me at a flower show. "You do all this yourself?" "Yeah," I said, wrapping up his bouquet. "It's my little kingdom of chaos." He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that made me look up. "I like that. A kingdom of chaos. Fits the bill for a flower shop." The transaction was smooth, and as he handed over the cash, he paused. "Hey, you got plans Friday night?" I raised an eyebrow, not sure if I heard him right. "Excuse me?" "For dinner. I mean, if you're free. I owe you one for helping me out." It took me a second. "You're asking me out?" "Yeah," he said, the corner of his mouth tilting up. "I guess I am." I should have said no. I had a rule about dating customers, especially ones that buy bouquets for their moms. But something about his straightforwardness, that glint in his eye, made me throw caution to the wind. "Sure," I found myself saying. "Why not?" "Great," he beamed. "I'll pick you up at 8? The rest of the day passed in a blur, his visit replaying in my mind. I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. After closing up, I called my best friend, Jessie. "You did what?" Jessie's voice blasted through the phone. "I said yes to a date. With a customer," I repeated, bracing for the lecture. "Girl, have you lost your mind? What about your no dating rule?" I sighed, leaning against the counter. I know. But there's something about him. He's different." "Different, huh?" Jessie chuckled. "Well, don't come crying to me when he turns out to be a frog instead of a prince." I laughed, shaking my head. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." That simple dinner date? It morphed into something neither of us expected. What started as casual outings became late-night talks, and those talks, they turned into an affair that was anything but casual. David was like a hurricane, sweeping into my life, turning everything upside down in the best way possible. Before I knew it, I was in love. Deeply. Madly. The kind of love I'd convinced myself didn't exist for me anymore. One night, sprawled on the couch after another one of our movie marathons, David looked at me, his eyes more serious than I'd ever seen. "Marry me," he said, no preamble, no ring, just raw honesty in his voice. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. "You're serious?" As a heart attack, he shot back, a grin breaking through. "I'm crazy about you. Let's do this. For real." It was nuts. Insane. We hadn't even been together that long, but when something feels right, you just know. And with David, everything felt right. So, I said yes. Just like that, I was engaged, stepping into a future I'd never dared to dream of. Who would have thought that a year after saying I do, I'd be staring at a pregnancy test, two pink lines glaring back at me? Not me, that's for sure. After everything with my first marriage, kids were the last thing on my mind. Yet, there I was, about to start a whole new chapter with David, one that neither of us had planned for. "Babe, you in there?" David's voice came through the bathroom door, laced with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Yeah, just give me a minute," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. When I finally stepped out, pregnancy test in hand, David knew. His eyes widened, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was deafening. "So, what's the verdict?" he asked, his voice a notch higher than usual. I held up the test, watching as his face transitioned from shock to something I couldn't quite place. Was it fear, excitement, or a mix of both? "We're gonna have a baby," I said, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. David stepped forward, wrapping me in a hug so tight it almost hurt. "Wow," he whispered. "Just, wow. We're gonna be parents." "Scared?" I asked, burying my face in his chest. "Terrified," he admitted. "But hey, we're in this together, right?" "Right," I agreed, though the fluttering in my stomach suggested my body wasn't as convinced. The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's appointments, morning sickness, and a never-ending carousel of emotions. With David often away on business trips, I found myself navigating this new reality solo. It wasn't easy, but the thought of the little life growing inside me kept me going. One evening, after a particularly rough day of nausea, I was sprawled on the couch when David called. "Hey, love, how's my favorite girl and our little bean?" he asked, his voice a balm to my frazzled nerves. "Your little bean has had me hugging the toilet all day," I grumbled, though a smile crept onto my lips at his enthusiasm. "Ah, the joys of pregnancy," he chuckled. "Listen, I was thinking, why don't you take it easy, quit the shop for a while? We've got savings, and this should be a time for you to relax, focus on the baby." I hesitated. My flower shop was my sanctuary, the one place where I felt in control. But as another wave of nausea hit, I realized David was right. "Maybe you're onto something," I conceded. "I'll think about it." "Good. And hey, I'll be home this weekend. We can talk more about it then." Hanging up, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Quitting my job meant embracing this new role fully, but it also meant letting go of a part of myself. Was I ready for that? David's return that weekend brought a sense of calm to the chaos. We spent hours discussing our future, making plans, and dreaming up names for our baby. It was during one of these conversations, curled up in bed, that I made up my mind. "I think I'm gonna do it," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Do what?" David mumbled, half asleep. "Quit the shop. For now, at least. Focus on being a mom." David propped himself up on one elbow, his eyes searching mine. "You sure? You love that place." "I do, but I love our family more. And who knows, maybe down the line, I can start something new. A flower shop that's also a nursery, maybe?" David laughed, pulling me closer. "You, my love, are brilliant. We'll figure it out. Together." And just like that, a new chapter began. Not just for me, but for us. It was daunting, sure, but with David by my side, I felt like we could tackle anything. Even the unpredictability of parenthood. The thing about dreams is, sometimes they're not yours, they're someone else's that just happen to bulldoze into your life. That's what happened with David's folks, specifically his mom, Linda. One lazy Sunday, Linda was over, again, gushing about the house. "Oh, darling, this place is just divine. So spacious, so elegant. Imagine the family gatherings we could have. Yeah, it's great for the two of us, and the baby, soon," I added, trying to be polite but firm. I wasn't about to let her interior decorating fantasies run wild in my home. "Oh, but think about it. With me and Greg here, you'd have all the help you'd need with the baby. Linda was like a steamroller, paving over any hint of resistance with well-meaning but suffocating enthusiasm. Greg, David's dad, was a quieter sort. He'd usually just nod along to whatever Linda was saying, adding a thoughtful here and there. But even he seemed a bit more invested this time. It's a big house, dear. Lots of room for family. I glanced at David, hoping for some backup, but he was conveniently engrossed in something on his phone. Coward. Look, Linda, Greg, I appreciate the offer, really, I began, mustering all the patience I had. But David and I are looking forward to figuring this out on our own. We need our space, you know? Linda's face fell slightly, but she recovered quickly, her smile a bit too tight. Of course, darling, we understand. Just remember, we're here if you need us. The conversation shifted, thankfully, but the weight of it lingered like a bad smell. David caught me in the kitchen later, away from the prying ears. Hey, I know my mom can be a bit much, he started, looking sheepish. But you handled that well. A bit much? I scoffed, leaning against the counter. She's planning to move in, David. That's not a bit. That's a whole lot of much. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know. I'll talk to them, okay? Just give me some time. Time, I muttered. Sure. Because what we have plenty of right now is time and space to accommodate everyone else's dreams. David winced. I get it. I do. And I'm on your side, babe. Team us, remember? Team us seems to be playing a man down lately, I said, not quite ready to let him off the hook yet. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. I'm here. And I promise, no unwelcomed guests in our future. Just us and the little one. I wanted to believe him, really. But the thing about unwelcome dreams is they have a way of showing up, invitation or not. And Linda, with her big dreams and steamroller tactics, wasn't the type to give up easily. The day Linda convinced me to go shopping with her was the day I realized patience was a virtue I desperately needed more of. It'll be fun, she had exclaimed, dragging me to what she called a little retail therapy. I should have known better. We hit the first store, and everything was fine until we got to the counter. Linda suddenly patted her purse and coat with a look of faux surprise. Oh dear, I seem to have left my wallet. Can you cover this, darling? I'll pay you back as soon as we get home. I was taken aback, but nodded, sliding my card across the counter. Sure, no problem. But then it happened again. And again. By the fourth store, my patience was wearing thinner than the soles of my shoes. We were in some fancy boutique, Linda holding up a dress that cost more than my monthly mortgage. Isn't this just darling? She gushed, not waiting for my response before heading to the checkout. As she once again performed her now familiar wallet pat-down, I felt something snap inside me. Linda, this has got to stop. I can't keep buying stuff for you. She looked at me, feigning confusion. But dear, it's no bother for you, is it? You've got plenty. A little shopping spree won't hurt. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my cool. It's not about the money, Linda. It's the principle. You keep forgetting your wallet. Doesn't seem quite fair, does it? Her face turned a shade I had only seen on overripe tomatoes. Fair? I thought we were family. Family helps each other out. Helping is one thing. This is taking advantage, I retorted, my voice firmer than I intended. She scoffed, placing the dress back on the rack with more force than necessary. Fine. I didn't realize I was such a burden. As we left the store, the silence between us was as heavy as the bags in my hands. The drive home was tense, and by the time we pulled up to the house, I was mentally drafting an apology. But before I could say anything, Linda turned to me, her voice softer. Look, I'm sorry. I just got carried away. You know how it is. I nodded, though I really didn't. It's okay, Linda. Let's just try to communicate better, okay? No more surprises at the checkout. That shopping trip with Linda was an eye-opener, not just about her, but about the kind of boundaries I needed to set. So, when she came knocking again, all smiles and invitations to hit up some sale at a fancy clothing store, I was ready with my answer. Thanks, but no thanks, Linda. I'm not really up for shopping, I said, hoping she'd catch the hint and leave it at that. But Linda, ever persistent, didn't skip a beat. Oh, come on. That's fine, dear. Just lend me your card, then. I saw this darling dress on sale, and it would be a shame to miss it. I stared at her, sure I'd misheard. My card? You want to use my credit card? Well, yes, Linda said, as if it was the most natural request in the world. You've got plenty, and we're family, aren't we? The audacity floored me. Linda, I'm not going to fund your shopping sprees. That's not how I use my money. Her face turned a shade I'd never seen on her before, caught between embarrassment and anger. Without another word, she huffed out of the house. A week passed with no word from Linda, which suited me just fine. Then, out of the blue, she showed up with Greg in tow, both of them wearing their best concerned in-laws faces. We've been thinking about you, dear. With the baby coming and all, you'll need all the help you can get, Greg started, his voice gentle. And we'd be more than happy to move in, help out with the little one, Linda added, as if the previous week hadn't happened. I couldn't believe we were back to this conversation again. Thanks, but no. David and I have got it covered. We don't need any extra help. David, who'd been quiet up to this point, finally chimed in. Mom, Dad, we appreciate it, but we're not looking to change our living situation. Please, let's not bring this up again. Their faces fell, a mix of surprise and disappointment, but they didn't push further. Not then, anyway. Linda and Greg left with a lot less cheer than they'd arrived with, and I was left wondering how many more rounds we'd have to go through before they finally got the message. When the time came to have our baby, everything that could go wrong, did. The doctors said our baby had serious health issues right from the start. Heart pounding, I begged David to come home, but work had him tied up across the country. Instead of him, I got Linda at the hospital, filling the room with her dramatics and blame. If only you'd had kids sooner, she kept saying, as if I needed that on top of everything else. Giving birth was the hardest thing I've ever done, especially knowing what was coming. When our baby didn't make it, something inside me broke. I've been stuck in that moment ever since, lost in a fog of grief. David finally got back and tried his best to pull me through, holding me while I cried, sitting with me in silence when I couldn't find the words. But Linda, she just couldn't grasp the depth of our loss. She actually suggested shopping to get over it, as if a new pair of shoes could fill the hole in my heart. We had it out then, her telling me I was being dramatic, and me too tired of her insensitivity to hold back any punches. Our home, filled with the echoes of a joy that never came to be, became a prison. The walls, the empty nursery, every corner a reminder of what we'd lost. I can't stay here, I whispered one night, the admission a crack in the dam I'd built around my heart. David held me, his own tears mingling with mine. Then we'll leave, he said, the decision made in the face of our shared agony. We'll start anew, somewhere else. For us, and for the memory of our child. We found a smaller place, far from Linda's reach and the memories that haunted us. The move couldn't come fast enough for me. I was counting down the days, eager for a fresh start away from the pitying looks and the silence that echoed too loudly in the rooms where our baby should have been. The idea of moving, of leaving it all behind, was the first thing in a long time that felt like hope. Not the bright, shining kind, but the gritty, determined sort that gets you out of bed in the morning when nothing else will. I was ready to say goodbye to the house, to Linda's interference, and to the shadow of grief that had settled over my life. I was ready to try and find some kind of peace, or at least a place where the memories weren't so loud. The days leading up to the move were a blur of boxes and packing tape. David had to jet off for what was supposed to be a quick trip, another project that couldn't wait. I was elbow deep in sorting through our lives when my phone rang. The voice on the other end was supposed to tell me David's flight got delayed or something trivial like that. Instead, it dropped my world out from under me. Accident at the site. David didn't make it. I was frozen, the phone slipping from my hand. We'd just lost our baby, and now David? It felt like some cruel joke, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I was still in that daze when Linda showed up, her timing impeccable as ever. But instead of the shared grief I expected, her first words knocked the breath from me. "Well, we'll have to move in with you now." It's what David would have wanted. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Was she serious? Her eyes roamed the room, already planning, already imposing her presence in a home that was about to not be mine anymore. "How can you even think about that now?" I managed, my voice hollow. "David is gone, Linda. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" She waved off my words, her mind clearly set. "We need to think practically. You can't stay here all alone." It's settled then. I couldn't handle it. Without another word, I turned and walked away, the sound of her voice fading as I shut the door to my room. Linda didn't know the house was already sold, that in a month, none of this would be mine anymore. Not that it mattered. With David gone, it didn't feel like mine anyway. The day finally came to close one chapter and start another. After signing the papers and sealing the deal, I went back to the old place to gather the last of my things. The doorbell rang just as I was wrapping up. Expecting maybe the new owners or a late mover, I opened the door, only to find a truck loaded with my in-laws' stuff. My heart sank. Not now, not today. Linda was all smiles, announcing they were moving in to take care of me, as if I hadn't made it clear that I needed space, not more chains. I was about to respond when she just started directing the movers to bring stuff in, as if she owned the place. Just then, the actual new owners pulled up, looking confused and a bit annoyed at the scene. They asked who these people were, and I had to explain. They're nobody, really. Just some folks who got the wrong address. The moment Linda realized the house had been sold, she exploded, accusing me of stealing her dream, of ruining everything. It was all about her dreams, her needs. Not once did she consider my feelings, my loss, or what I wanted for my future. Her husband, ever the quiet one, then had the audacity to suggest they move in with me to my new place. As if after everything, that was somehow going to be okay. I was beyond words. "Look, I don't know what fantasy world you're living in, but you're not part of my life anymore. Not like this. You need to leave." I turned to the new owners, my face burning with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. Let me help you get them off your property." The suggestion of calling the police was enough to get them moving. They left, taking their truck of broken dreams with them. Settling into my new place was like stepping into a fresh start, a chance to build something from the ground up, just for me and, as it turned out, for someone else too. The house felt empty at first, like it was waiting to be filled with life and laughter again. And life, unpredictable as ever, had a plan. The insurance money came through sooner than expected, a bittersweet reminder of everything lost. But it gave me the means to start anew, to do something meaningful. That's when I decided to adopt. There was a little one, abandoned, needing a home as much as I needed to fill mine. Bringing that child into my life, into my home, changed everything. It felt right, like this was meant to be my path all along. As for Linda and her husband, last I heard, they blew through their money on foolishness and ended up in some cramped apartment. Can't say I'm surprised. They were always more about the show than the substance. Serves them right, I muttered to myself when Jessie, my best friend, brought me the gossip. But I didn't dwell on it. They made their choices, and I made mine. Jessie, ever the rock, dropped by one day, her usual whirlwind self. "Look at you," she said, eyeing the chaos of toys and art supplies that now decorated my living room. "Who would have thought, huh? I smiled, watching my child play. Not me, that's for sure. But I wouldn't change a thing. David would be over the moon, she added softly, leaning on the counter. Yeah, I sighed, my heart heavy with missing him but filled with love for the life we were building. He would be. Our life moved on, filled with the small adventures and challenges of raising a child. My heart, once broken, began to heal, wrapping itself around my new purpose. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I was meant to have. And through all the ups and downs, I felt David's love, a guiding light through the darkness.